that out loud?
No, I don't think we're actually on yet. Probably.
We're going soon. Okay. Where we?
Oh,
where
we're live! Ha ha! What's up? Okay. So, hello everybody. We are Dungeons and Derek's, or Derek Ward, and John.
Yes,
Here to talk to you about world building. And boy, do we have a wonderful, exciting topic for you guys tonight. It is world building part 2. Basic world building part 2. And I think John has a little bit of some interesting things he wants to talk about tonight.
I
And
certainly
we're
hope
not
so.
going to be... Oh, me too. We won't be talking about Saturday's game, as it was a significantly shorter session than we normally have, so as such we don't have a guest. So instead, we're just going to rather pleasantly enjoy sitting here talking about world building. And why don't you go ahead and kick us off there, John?
Okay, yeah. The first thing I wanted to start on was, and this is something that I know you have some opinions on, so I figured I'd start with this. About play style.
Mm.
Um, I believe you have some stories, particularly about the transition from Pathfinder to 5e.
Yes. Our group actually originally started, and this is even before John's time with us, as a Pathfinder group, a Pathfinder campaign. Specifically, fairy hack and slash. Or monsters. It's epic fantasy. I wanted, deep down, I desperately wanted to do essentially Mass Effect. You know, I wanted big political schemes and interesting things and overarching villains and tons of races, things along those lines. And it's not what the group wanted at the time. The group wanted to get magic items and cut out monsters. And
There's not really anything wrong with that, of course, but
no. And by God, that's what I gave them.
Mm.
But you know, sometimes that gets a little boring. And we're only recently really getting everyone to finish moving into a more political, intrigue, immersive, storytelling based roleplay game. And I mean, I'm delighted by it.
that isn't for everyone, and I'd
No.
openly admit that. And as something they list in the DMG about continuing or episodic campaigns, you know, if you're going weeks or months between a session, it, like, even with notes, it can be very hard for your players to keep up with truly, that in depth. So
Mm.
in that case, like, how often you play honestly does have, in my opinion at least, on what type of play style you can have, not necessarily what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Another really important thing is like what you yourself can afford to spend like your time on and how long. Because if you want to sit down and you want to write this big role play based immersive storytelling campaign, by God, all means do it. If you are a father in his 40s with 4 kids and a full-time job and you want to run that once a week, you know, give it a shot. Absolutely. But you got a lot on your plate as is. And, you know, you might just have just as much fun with significantly less time put in running a hack and slash game.
In my opinion at least, I think it also has a lot to do with when you get into it.
Yes.
I will be honest, you say that, but even when you're in your 40s and have a full-time job, Derek, I can't ever see you going back to white like you were before. I would see you quitting before I see you doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, like, I don't mind running a one-shot in hack and slash, but for me, I've always... I'm very much that political intrigue, the big, oh, we're in this big grand city, or what kind of like adventure awaits for us, like whose coins are we gonna get, and like for what job, and are we gonna sabotage something, you know, like something. I like that thing that's more than just brave adventurers go into the nearby dungeon and please kill the beholder that is besieging our city. And you know what? That's fucking awesome. I love beholders. I love sieging cities. Dear God, it's great. But for me,
We're aware.
oh yeah, you are. For me, it does just hit this point where it feels unfulfilling, and I find it more difficult to write for things like that. And if you're finding yourself in that kind of position where you're running the game that your players like want run, but you're not having fun, voice that. Don't just sit there and deal with that, because if you're not having fun and they're the only ones having fun, very soon they're not going to be having fun either, because it shows.
Burn out way faster.
You do. But that's not to say there isn't that there's anything inherently wrong about hack and slash. I know people, I'm great friends with people that play hack and slash campaigns and prefer hack and slash campaigns, and that's great,
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't disagree. Going in from that, I think, because I think we've gotten that one pretty well.
Yeah.
Is
Actually, there is one more thing on that topic I'd like to discuss, if that's okay.
more than fine. I just thought we were winding there, but if you got more, oh, go ahead.
Well, the only thing, there's a couple of things I want to mention just involving that, and that is communication is really, really important. Don't just like you have your players. You have 4 people that are like, yeah, we want to play a D&D game with you. Cool. Figure out what they want to play, figure out what you want to play, and communicate that. There has to be some form of dialogue. If you don't have open dialogue about what you're doing, somebody's going to end up disappointed.
I definitely agree.
And there's nothing wrong with some hack and slash and some role play and intrigue. You don't have to stick exactly to one. You know what I mean?
I definitely get you, I think.
Now, I will say we won't talk too much about this, but I do think that maybe in the future we should have a pretty decent episode that talks kind of like building your campaign's play style almost. You know what I mean?
I definitely wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't disagree with that, especially because there are places and times where you might very well have something where you throw at least a good chunk of the plot out and are like, all right, it's monster fighting time.
Yeah, it's go time.
For example, just a quick aside, our party not too long ago was involved in what was called the Wild Hunt.
Yes.
There was some plot involved with that, and there were things that we learned from it, but by and large it was us going out and killing monsters.
More or less. And there is nothing wrong with that, especially if your players are like, now gauge your players' reactions. You know what I mean? Like if you throw out a festival like the Wild Hunt that I created, which was a festival about hunting monsters that were migrating and things like that. Cool. Yeah, watch your players. If they go, oh my god, yes. When you're like, yeah, it's a festival about hunting monsters, and they are on board, do it. Run it. It's great. If they go, you know what I mean? Give them an out. Give them something else to do. Maybe somebody is sabotaging the Wild Hunt, and they have to figure out who's doing it and deal with that, and maybe that involves entering and dealing with some of the monsters. So, like, you can lead them towards what you've written already, but if they're not interested in it, adjust it. Make it so something that you can be interested in and they can.
I definitely wouldn't disagree with that. I with that almost kind of makes me think going a completely opposite direction with that. If they're using some of the new stuff from the Acquisitions Incorporated book, maybe is a chance for your players to actually get into some business if they want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Of them like starting to run like they're like where they start making magic items or they start selling to various competitors, and you can take something that traditionally would be a very, hack and slash sort of thing, and maybe add some intrigue to it, have them sneak around, get secrets, do that sort of thing, give the rogues something to do.
Absolutely. And the last thing that I personally have to say on this, and the only reason I bring this up here of all places, although I do think it's a strange place to put it for the DMG, is the 5e DMG underneath like playstyle and stuff like that lists your character names and how you need to make sure they match with the campaign and with each other and stuff like that. And that's very important. And again, that's something you have to have an open dialogue about. Because I knew this great guy. He was a player of mine. He was part of the group for a long time. But he never wanted to take it in the same direction as the other players, but didn't really talk too much about it. So we'd end up with a party of like Artemis the Paladin, like we have right now, as he was a very long running character of Kyle's. And like all of these different characters. I remember Braden played a vampire, and then we had Fist Kick Dick. That is not a joke. That was one of the party's names. Was Fist Kick Dick, and
I'm so glad I missed this. I'm
I
so glad I missed it.
I honestly love the guy, and he was fantastic. But it's hilarious to me because the DMG literally mentions like you have these big fantasy named characters, and you have Bob, and he actually did that. We had a group of all these like fantasy characters, and he played Bob the Barbarian. He also had a character once upon a time named Monkety Monk. So it is real. You might read that section of the DMG and say like, yeah, it's fine. Oh, well, it'll be fine. People will make their characters and all the names will match. Make sure. Make sure.
You don't, although I will note with that, make sure they're on the same level of fantasy. Like, because for example, like there are races that have different naming styles, like the elves. Although, as advice, limit any character with that's an elf to about 2 apostrophes. Any more,
Two is
any
even a
more
lot
than
for
that.
me.
I say 2 because one for first and one for last name.
Okay, that's fair. Oh yeah, you don't want to end up with Alan Quinn Quildale de Fangisk of God only knows where.
Especially because, and this is a stereotype, but unfortunately this is a stereotype for good reason. If you have any player that's going to be annoyed about somebody not saying their full name, it's probably going to be the elf.
It's probably going to be the elf. Reminds me of a meme a long time ago I read that was like all feared the Elven Prince, where he had 13 apostrophes in his name.
I think it was 14 actually.
14. It's too funny to me though, because it's accurate. It comes from that. But okay, that's all I have to say on playstyle, unless you have any more.
That's perfectly reasonable. Although going into that, a good transition I think would be flavors of fantasy.
Love it. I love it so much. Well, I mean, like you talk fantasy, and there's so much out there, because you have Lord of the Rings, which I would say is like a heroic fantasy kind of thing, you know what I mean? And then you've got like R.A. Salvatore's kind of like novels and stuff like that with sword and sorcery, and there's so many different flavors, you can't just go get ice cream.
That's definitely true. I mean, like even just base D&D, like for example, a lot of like D&D modules are mythic or epic or sword and sorcery, which they're all fairly similar and have like a lot of interconnecting bits. But I mean, for example, Ravenloft and Curse of Strahd I would classify that as dark fantasy or even intrigue sometimes.
Absolutely. And then I mean, like it's interesting because you can pretty much put one of the flavors of fantasy to any story you read and any D&D source book. Like let's look at the most recent like D&D adventure with Ghost of Saltmarsh. Speaking of which, if you have not read Ghosts of Saltmarsh, do yourself a favor and pick it up. It's fantastic. It's genuinely fantastic. Like
except for when the DM realizes that they give the name of one of the gods that his players aren't supposed to know about,
Okay.
and he rapidly does a U-turn on that for his players reading it.
I've borderline accepted the fact that you guys are gonna learn the identity of the chain god at some point, and I'm expecting it to get spoiled for you guys, and I'm just kind of dealing with it at this point. But God, it's a good source book. It's a great adventure module. It's one of those things, like, it came out while I was on vacation in Florida, and it, like, I forgot it came out, and I flipped my phone on at midnight, and I was supposed to go to the zoo with Janna in the morning. We're gonna go on a date to the zoo. I believe that was the day, and I didn't fall asleep till like 3 a.m. because I was like, oh my god, check out this stuff with the aberration. Oh, I was just like, oh my god, it's beautiful. Look at the drowned with their special diseases, blue rot and stuff like that. And that's actually, and I said I wasn't gonna talk too much about last session because not much happened, but there you go. That's you guys fought your first Saltmarsh based monster last night with with Wesley, the drowned adventurer who there with the greatsword was a drowned master. And oh my god, everything that came out of Saltmarsh makes me unequivocally excited. But besides that, flavors of fantasy, like, you can look at any of the adventure modules that you pick up and find them on there. For example, you pick up, like you mentioned, Curse of Strahd, dark fantasy or intrigue. You pick up Ghost of Saltmarsh, you've got Swashbuckling. You pick up, and this is jumping the gun a little bit because it's not out for, I guess, 3 months, 4 months. You pick up the new Descent to Avernus, and you've got War. You know what I mean? So you've got all these flavors of fantasy. And before I pass it over to John here, because I'm sure I'm talking way too much, you can take 2 of these flavors and smash them together. Everyone likes mint chocolate.
I mean, you aren't wrong, and I definitely don't disagree with that. We'll be honest, yeah, in terms of writing stuff for my own, and really, like, they try and spice up, like, your games. Like, if you tend towards one style, like one flavor of fantasy, don't be afraid to add in something from something else, or just go a completely different kind, but you tend towards a specific type because that's what they like.
Right.
And that
So
does change. Oh, go ahead.
sorry. I was gonna say, so you're pretty much saying, like, don't be afraid to, like, throw in a little bit of spices into the same recipe
Don't
you've been making.
don't be afraid of that, but at the same time, don't be afraid of going vanilla either. Don't be afraid of going with what you're used to. Like, I myself honestly tend towards mythic fantasy, like, more of the gods, or where the divine, if they're not there, are directly influential.
Mm.
Something that and because this also changes over time what you prefer, because just what, a year and a half ago at this point, when I met you, Derek, you were very much against having much of any interaction with the gods.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because I don't know. I guess the first month that I was a DM, somebody rolled a nat 20 and I made them a champion of God. And
That's not what nat 20s are for, and that's
no. They were like, pray to their god, and I said roll a charisma check, and they rolled a nat 20. And this was again back in Pathfinder, like we mentioned. It was I can't remember his, I think it's like Caden Colleen or something like that, who is a drunken god. He's a drunken god. So I was like, he's drunk, he makes them their champion. Okay, sure, sure, why not? That went awfully.
How did that go?
Awfully.
that does not surprise me. By the way, just a quick aside, I love how the 2 examples they give in mythic fantasy are Gilgamesh and Cuckoo Lane.
Are they?
Say, from Gilgamesh to Cuckoo Lane.
Really? Oh, hell yes. I mean, That's interesting to me. Oh, okay, this is getting off topic, so I'll just be quick about it. Because like everybody knows Gilgamesh, right? Like
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. How many people know Cuckoo Lane?
That's my thought. Yeah, I was like everybody knows Gilgamesh. The only reason I know Cuckoo Lane is because I watched Fate when I was a teenager. That's it. That's the only reason.
I knew him because I'm a European mythology nerd, but
are the biggest European mythology nerd.
What's that, Derek? The guy whose entire character was originally based around the fucking round table?
Okay.
And mythology nerd?
You've got a point.
What a shock.
Also, I totally thought you were gonna be like, oh, is it Derek, the guy that showed up to the class I met you in wearing freaking fake beards? I was like, boy.
I wasn't gonna bring that up, but
I'm not embarrassed. They're wonderfully knitted and they're quite warm. But
okay, I think we've got flavors of fantasy. Then I think that was a good stopping point.
Yeah, there's the end of okay. So I want to ask you, where would you think you would peg Araya?
This is a tough one for me.
It is.
I would say that you bounce between heroic fantasy, because you do have big threats, you do have heroes. Regardless of how our characters act, sometimes they are meant to be heroes. But at the same time, you do have a little bit more gray that you would expect to see in sword and sorcery. You do have those that aren't necessarily, but you've toned down on this, but magic items, especially early on, were a lot rarer.
Yeah.
I wouldn't not Dark Sun rare, not by any means, but
God no. I like Dark Sun, but
it's D&D 40k, Derek. Don't even lie.
It is. Look, don't even get me started on 40k. I'll get Nat upset with me. But that being said, I would personally, and the reason why I ask you that is because it is a little bit of a difficult question, because there is a lot of political intrigue. There's, I try to keep a mystery element to it. There's definitely ever-present war. And so, there's a lot of mix there. And the reason I ask you that is because I didn't expect you to give a full, just one answer. And I did that as an example. So I'm sorry, John, I used to use an example. When you make a campaign, do not be afraid to just throw them all together. Like I said, everyone likes mint chocolate. So if you want to have some mythic campaign where the party shows up and is working alongside Hero King Gilgamesh and fighting against with these grand weapons and all sorts of crazy stuff like that, epic fantasy style, by all means, I'd play it. I'd watch it.
When your friend accidentally just basically describes what you're planning for your future campaign.
Whoops! But there you go. I'll play it. I'd watch it. But essentially, what I'm saying is, do not feel stuck from the DMG. It is a guide. It is the Dungeon Master's guide, and like any good guide, it lights your path. But there's other paths. You don't have to take that one. If you move off that path, you'll find something else. You'll light your way with something else. And there's so many resources out there. So do not look to the Dungeon Master Guide as an end-all, be-all, final Bible of everything you have to follow. And if you choose your tier of play and your playstyle and your flavor, you have to stick to that. I cannot explain to you the changes that Araya has gone through over the span of the past year, when I went, oh shit, I don't like who I am as a person or a writer and changed a lot of things. And that's super okay.
However, just remember, if you go Wuxia, you're a weeb. Not a bad person,
Well,
but a weeb.
I mean, well,
Looks over an entire continent. Yeah, I'm aware.
I mean, look, okay, it's cool. I grew up watching kung fu movies that were poorly dubbed. I love it. But
Oh, I love it too. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to throw a little shade.
I mean, that's fair. Plus, we all know you're a weeb, so it's okay.
I've never denied this. You're the
No,
one who's closeted.
that's true. Closet weeb. All right. Anyway, what's your next topic, or do you have some more to add to the flavors?
Because the next one is one I actually do have a little bit to say about, and that's
Ooh.
tiers of play.
I'm gonna leave a huge chunk of this to you because I know you and I have varying opinions on this. So I'll let you start off.
I don't so yes. The thing is that I don't entirely disagree with levels where you're like what your character should be doing and like what kind of things they should be fighting and how important they are. I don't disagree with that generally speaking. In as I said, in general, it's a good get. It's something to hopefully keep you grounded because as a DM and as a player, sometimes it can be very hard determining like what the outside world like what the rest of the world is like outside of your party. This ended up happening a couple sessions ago when Kenneth slapped a person with a packed weapon gauntlet and immediately knocked him out. Because this was mostly in character, but a little bit Jon forgetting just how fragile normal people are in a D&D setting.
Yeah. I mean, when you think that, like, in all technicality, your average person is like level 0, you could say. You know, they're a commoner. They don't. And I think there was actually, I don't remember if it was homebrew or if it was Unearthed Arcana, but there was a like a commoner class, and that is a fantastic read if you have a chance to do it. While you talk next, I'll look it up so I can give proper credit for that one because it's genuinely hilarious. Well, like when you think about that, and you think that your average person probably has like 5 hit points, maybe,
And
then
it just
yeah.
with that, honestly, and this is something that's not covered here, but I think maybe should be, is statistics. Important to remember that like a 10 is average, but a 10's average for an adventurer.
Yeah.
By and large, like even in settings where you have a lot of adventurers, having a 10 in something isn't bad by any stretch. It just means you're not necessarily good at it. But I mean, like even Kenneth's 10 strength, I mean, he still has like a respectable carry weight, a respectable lift weight, like probably honestly above what I could do.
Yeah.
Among a party of freak shows with their 17, 18, 20 strengths, it can sometimes be hard for you and the DM to reconcile that. And sort of where I get with going into that though is specifically where they list what magic items you should have per level play, because as they listed in the DMG, on average you shouldn't be getting very rare magic items until you're level 11.
Yeah. And I do agree with that because like I think in the DMG, if I remember correctly, they're like, yeah, you might get some like uncommon items and stuff like that. Levels like 1 through 4, or like 1 through 5. I think it's 4. And I'm with you on that one.
Yes, very few uncommons is specifically what they say for 1 through 4.
Yes. Also, before I forget, the commoner class is written by a user on Reddit named Kaberu, Kaberu. Definitely, like, not telling you to use it. It's very niche, but it is a genuinely solid read.
But thank you. But yeah, so the thing is that in all honesty, they don't list dragons, adult dragons, until 11 through 16, which Masters of the Realm. Now, admittedly, he did so when it was a dumb idea and with a lot of uh, preparation and a small bit of luck. But we at level 8 took down a dragon.
It's true.
Admittedly, not in its lair. That's something very important to keep note of, and something that as a DM, you honestly should do. And my like, I could talk about for hours why I hate did for the perception of what a dragon is and does.
All of the dragons in Skyrim were white dragons.
Well, not only that, but just them just flying down and landing and forgetting they could fly. Even the white dragon we fought, because if we fought anything more intelligent than that, we would have been so done. But even it did strafing runs, did its best to stay at a distance. It wasn't completely bone dead stupid, even though it was closer to an animal. Is that like when you're 5 to 10, you're not going to be fighting dragons on even terms, but you might be fighting them on the player's terms. Up against something like a Hydra, and maybe a rare magic item or two, they're gonna die brutally. Like, they list giants. Like, what's the average giant strength, Derek? Like, above 25, generally speaking.
Oh yeah, like an actual giant. Yeah. There are some lesser giants out there. Like I'm trying to remember the exact name of it. I guess I can't remember. They're a Cyclops. There it is. Which I think are closer to like 20, 23, somewhere in that kind of realm. But when you get to a real, oh yeah, and when you get to a real giant, you're looking 25 to 30.
Yes, I mean, and yes, they are meant to be strong. They are, generally speaking, meant to be stronger than the party. It's one of those with the level of, like, if you're a new DM and you're assuming that this is what your players should have, and you're like, no, I don't want you to have anything stronger than this, and they go up against those kind of things, I
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I do generally agree, and that it gives you a good framework for how important your characters should be in the setting. Again, with sort of perspective, like, thinking on it completely legitimately. Of course, the players don't by any means need to be the strongest people in any room. Consider just how strong, for example, just level 10 is. Like, on a chart, you'd go, but I'm only half as strong as I could be. Is still just one out in the middle of nowhere is probably the strongest person for miles. A level 10 character is somebody who could go out and probably put down an entire 20, like a small army of goblins, no problem.
Oh yeah.
Not even a wizard, just like a fighter could probably just mow through just hordes of enemies. And it's hard to do that, because especially a lot of DMs do that admittedly the tiers of play kind of cause escalation. You feel you have to constantly escalate, and you don't. Despite everything I just said about escalating, remember that you don't have to.
Yeah, there's nothing like necessarily wrong with making your high level players fight something that might be considered below them, because fact of the matter is, when you hit like a decent level, even like 5th level, there's a lot of things that are below them, and you can throw that at them sometimes.
I definitely agree, and just because you've popped the dragon cherry doesn't mean that everything they fight from that point on has to be a dragon or as strong as one.
And that was definitely something I found myself, like a pitfall I found myself getting into a while ago, is when I first started Araya, I asked everybody, okay, how difficult do you want this campaign to be? And I went through like the difficulty ranges provided base D&D, so it's like easy, medium, hard, very hard, deadly, I think are the
I don't
ones.
actually know that one.
I'll check in a second. But everyone was like very hard or deadly, and I was like, okay, that was the consensus.
Hey, I didn't know what. Don't say everyone.
Fair enough. The general consensus was like very hard or deadly, and I was like, okay, I can do that. Also, there is no very hard, excuse me, so it's just easy, medium, hard, deadly. But I was like, okay, I'll work with it. I'll figure it out. I'll do something. And well, sure enough, I worked with it all right. And I eventually found myself at this point where like I had to make sure that every encounter was scaled harder than the last one. This one's gonna be harder. Oh, this one's gonna be this is gonna challenge them. And your goal is not to kill the party. Your goal is not to make every encounter harder than the last. It should
Unless you're playing Insomnia.
Okay, well, but the general point is, in my opinion, a well thought out, well planned campaign does not involve just this constant escalation of combat, and I agree with that misconception.
Although of course there is, honestly, and this is something that your players a lot of time are going to scale how hard they're fighting, how tough what you're throwing them is. Yes. Like, for example, your paladin can almost always hit harder than he is. He's just choosing not to. He's choosing to be sparing. Your warlock, generally speaking, can hit harder than they are, but they're being nice about it. It's when things start,
all you can hope for.
Because honestly, once the various tougher resurrection rules out there, even with that sort of thing, even with taking like making magic items rare, even with doing all that sorts of things, once your characters hit 9th to 12th level, not that big a deal anymore. Not really. Even if you make it as hard as you can, completely legitimately, at that point, like, might very well be an adventure. But it's not this character dies and we're done. Like, if you're a level 3 character and somebody dies, they're kind of done.
Yeah. And I will say, gauge the audience thing. Gauge your players, but don't be afraid to throw combat encounters at them that they can't handle. The world is big, the world is tough, the world is crazy. There are going to be things that your party can't beat. Throw those at them,
like archdemons.
Yeah, like the archdevil's appearance of Viserius. I didn't actually have him fully statted, but I knew his general things, and I could have very easily improv'd a fight between the party and Viserius. The thing is,
couldn't have won.
I know who would have won. Yeah, and
yes,
the party was smart to stand down and not fight. So you have to make sure your party is actually going to do that. Because if you're running a hack and slash campaign and you throw a encounter at them that they're supposed to run from, they're probably not going to.
Yeah, and make that, because that is something that ultimately you do. Because this is something that we've debated with Derek for some time on, of how to be clear about that. Because here's the thing, always, and this is as a player I'm saying this, not just as somebody who DMs or tries to DM, that as somebody who's a player, your players are morons. Not often. Like, never assume that the normal intelligence of your player is what you have to deal with. Always assume that they are going to be dim and slow in the moments you want them to be their smartest.
And you're not there to kill them. Don't be afraid to ask, are you sure? And if they say yes, don't be afraid to ask, are you really, really sure? And if they say yes, let them do it. You know? Like, that's... Yeah. I received a piece of advice that I think is a double-edged sword. And that piece of advice is something that a lot of DMs receive, and that is never say no. It's not entirely true. Never say no to a player's idea. If a player says, I want to do this, don't be like, no, you can't do that because I don't want you to. No, don't do that. That makes you a bad DM. But if your players say, I want to do this, run 80 feet, backflip off a wall, punch an enemy in the face 5 times, and I want to genuinely roll for these and stuff like that, and it's not, they don't want to treat it as one attack. They want to bend the rules in such a way that is unfair if they want to damage something that another player has worked for in a way that you know is going to cause substantial issues. For instance, say the wizard decides they're going to make a magic item, and the paladin decides they don't agree with that magic item without having previously talked to the wizard, or the player runs in and destroys it when the player is not looking. Facilitate that. That's your job. Facilitate it. Sit down, stop the session, and say, okay, we need to talk about this. Do not be afraid to stop a session. You got to do that sometimes.
Don't be afraid, especially not just for that, just quick aside, don't be afraid to stop a session if you're like, because improving is one thing, but if a player just did something, not necessarily that, but plot-wise, where you're like, I can't to think about this.
Right. It's like, say they walk into a throne room and there's a visiting diplomat who is like a prince from the neighboring kingdom, and they run over and stab them in the throat. You're like, what the hell? And that's a lot. That's a lot to process.
Not just that, but and because where this sort of goes in is what you're talking about with encounters your characters can't beat. Be prepared for your characters to maybe beat them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the rolls are not your favor and are in theirs. Mm-hmm. And for example, like, almost certain that this wouldn't have happened, but maybe somehow Archfiend. And then you just go, okay, you did good, but I need to process this for a while and figure out what the hell's gonna happen next.
Oh yeah. I would have to have stopped the session because I'd be like, what? It would have just been such a mind-numbing thing. And I can't. I want to talk about it. I can't quote the tweet. I read this the other day on Twitter. I can't quote who said it or even quote it exactly. So please pardon me. I'm not trying to steal somebody else's thought. This was something I read, not from me. But I remember reading on Twitter this week that becoming a skilled DM is when you hone that skill that says, my players would never do this, and then you prepare for it anyway.
I mean, you describe it as like writing, like you've got like, all right, I got 2 sessions done, let's do 4. Prepare for that being because your players skip the middle 2 and skip straight to the 4th.
Yeah. Now I have to say, I wrote this big temple that the party just walked in at the end of last session. Love it. Oh my god, one of my favorite combat encounters is inside of it. There's lore, there's puzzles. God, there's good stuff. I'm so excited for it. The party had an idea that if executed properly, they could have gone straight to the end boss fight. And
is that the dimension door?
Yeah,
Derek?
That was going to be your dimension door. Now, it would have sucked and it could have gotten you killed, but it would have taken you straight to the boss fight and you'd skip the entire temple. And I have to say, I was going to let it happen because it was interesting. And that's another thing is if you are not against your players. I can't stress this enough. There's so many people out there that view like that awful video game. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. That okay video game that came out a while ago called Evolve, where it was like
Oh.
the 1v3 kind of thing. Yeah. D&D is not that. You are not the bad guy. You're not. Your goal is not to kill the party.
You might play the bad guy sometimes, but sometimes
Yeah.
you might also like, hopefully at least, you also play the good guys.
When they get to the end of the dungeon and they kill the big bad that you were just playing, you shower them with interesting lore and items and gold, and you reward them. You don't go, fuck, I lost. No. It's something I've seen happen. It's something I was in the mindset of when I was younger and DMing, because God, it's something else to think that I started DMing at like 15. Like, jeez. But point being, what it comes down to is don't view yourself as the villain and you're against them, because you're not. Everyone's there to have a good time, and what matters is everybody's fun. So I don't even remember where I was taking this, but point is, oh, now I know. If your players are coming up with ideas and they're talking about them around you, and you ask them to come up with ideas and plan things, and they're doing them around you, do not punish them for having those ideas. If they come up with this great plan, like the party came up with the idea to travel by sea and go in through the jungle at the bottom, and me being the DM went, aha, there are drowned down there. They will have to fight zombies under the ocean. That's cool. I'm into it. Do not say, oh, they're gonna go in through the sea and teleport into the bottom of the anti-magic field on teleportation magic. Don't do that. Don't.
Krampus.
No, that was fair. But
no, it fucking wasn't, you bastard.
That's a topic for another day. But essentially,
episode 4, Krampus.
Krampus, yeah, exactly. Essentially, just don't punish your players for having good ideas and plans. Let them have them. Let them do them. And even if they have the idea and you know it's not going to work, let them try it and be prepared for it not to work. Be prepared for it to work if it does.
Like, for completely legitimately, yeah, like, none of us know about the drowned, but going through that would have been way easier than going through the city still, completely legitimately.
It's very true. The big danger was going to be stopping the drowned from alerting the rest of the creatures in the city. And it would have been interesting because, like, when you say that, just discussing that over the span of like 5 minutes, they're going in through the city, or rather through the sea. There's drowned there, and they have a hive mind mentality that allows them to telepathically communicate with each other. Okay, cool. That's a gimmick. You have a gimmick, you have a monster, you have a location. You've got an encounter, and a damn good one. Take the time to make a map and flesh it out, and you're ready. You know what I mean?
That's completely fair, in my opinion. Now, I think that's all we're going to get of that. I think for the last little bit of this, we might end up covering more of this at a different time. I did want to talk about something that isn't, at least I haven't found, in the DMG, more specifically about how to world build around different styles of leveling.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Like, for example, for anyone who's watching this who doesn't follow what we're doing, the party relatively recently leveled up to level 9. Now, we had been level 8 for a very long time. Now,
that,
admittedly,
4 months?
It's been a while. I think
It's been a while. It's been a
while. I'll go on the larger estimate, because it has been a bit. I will say completely legitimately that a couple of the levels I actually went to Derek and I said, I think we're going a little bit too fast with this, but I would like to hear, because you're the one who's actually run a 5th edition campaign. What would you say about world building for the different types of leveling, XP and milestone?
The first thing I'm going to say, it's difficult. Um, the the thing I prefer milestone over XP for is because, and don't get me wrong, XP has a billion merits. It's great. Everyone loves XP. Everyone likes to see those numbers go up. Everyone likes to be told you role played very well, and I'm happy that you showed up and stayed so engaged. Have 20 XP. It doesn't matter how little it is. It doesn't matter what level they are. They watch that number go up, and it's satisfying. It's great. It is a great tool, but it's hard to plan around because you can't necessarily say how much XP is going to be given out to your players because you don't know. You don't know what that encounter 2 months from now is going to be because you don't know what they're going to do tomorrow. And that's what makes it so difficult to plan around because you can't say when they're going to be that specific level. And Milestone hits that on a level as well because I didn't know when the party was going to discover who Obvisarius was, but that was this milestone, was discovering the big bad Obvisarius. And it could have been a month from now, as far as I know. And you have to be flexible about that. So if they didn't discover that he was Obvisarius and they were doing other things, and they hit something that you think was really cool, or was this beautiful moment of roleplay, or incredible combat, or even both, reward that. Reward it with a level. And the big thing that I have to say is everyone views levels as, like the end all be all. Oh, yes, I gotta be careful. It's dangerous. And it is. You have to be careful when you give levels. You have to be careful how much experience you give and ration and figure things out and how you want to run that, especially depending on what type of campaign you're running.
One quick thing, just as a side, when you said
Yeah,
rationing,
absolutely.
now this is because this is something that I've heard people do to be very careful about. The amount of XP that is listed in the monster manual is divided up among the party.
Yes.
That does not go.
The other
That does
thing,
not go.
the experience is multiplied, but depending on how many monsters you have. It is not just the sum of all of the different monsters in an encounter. So that's a lot. That's something we will have an entire episode or 2 or 3 about designing interesting encounters.
That feeling when you didn't actually know that.
You didn't? Oh, well, there you go. That's something to know. You actually don't just sum up all the monsters. It is multiplied, and the difficulty of a encounter is also multiplied depending on how many creatures you have. So if you have 2 creatures, I think it's still 1, but every subsequent creature you add, it begins to be 1.25 times experience, 1.5 times experience.
Out of curiosity, what was that the drowning ghost encounter? What was that what was the CR of that?
The CR in total of that one? Let me check, because if you don't use D&D Beyond, anyone watching, oh my god, it's so good. It really just makes planning things so much easier. Okay, so it was a hard level encounter. And see, there's something interesting. There we go. So altogether, if I were to just add up the experience for that final encounter from last session, the total experience that would have been divvied out just from adding is 6,250. When actually doing the proper multiplication, things like that, the actual total experience to be divvied out is 11,200 or 1,400 per character. Yeah. So that's a really, really important thing to notice and to pay attention to, because if you miss that, you could end up shortchanging your players by almost half the experience they should have received. It's a dangerous game.
Yeah, and
where was I?
Oh, well, with that into world building, and
yes,
I will say this is that personal view, at least. Example, you with the scale in which you're building your campaign,
Yeah.
you might very well have things that you plan to be milestones. Sometimes, often, pretty much always, your players are going to disagree. Your
Yeah.
players are not like, you might have a dragon like up in the mountains. And you're like, all right, they're going to come back to this, and it's going to be like their 12th level is they're going to go up and they're finally going to kill a dragon.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I'll be honest with you. The milestone for level 10, and it's very different now. So I know, the milestone for level 10 for you guys was back in the in Setium at the shipyard. There was a big like intrigue thing that you guys were gonna figure out and get to the bottom to, and like as you were figuring things out, it was gonna be like, congratulations, you're level 10. It's not gonna happen. That's okay. But it's one of those things
because we're not going back to that damn place.
Yeah, you're like, we're not going back to Setium, and it's like, all right, oh, that's fine. And I've got a equally as cool plan ready for Akiad. But that being said, we're getting close to wrapping up, so I'll finish my thought from a second ago, and that was, when you're doing milestone, it's much easier to figure exactly like what you're going to do. So you're like, okay, well, I've got this and this and this, and you can figure out a general what's the word, dispersion of levels across the campaign that you have, and it's going to change a lot, and that's entirely okay. Yeah, don't micromanage it. Oh dear God, whatever you do, don't just don't micromanage your players. Nobody likes that. But overall, a lot of people are afraid to give levels. And the way that I treat levels that makes it feel a little bit less scary is you give out gold as a reward. Then you give out magic items as a reward. Then you give out levels as a reward. When it comes to mechanical power creep based things, those are your... And there is a mysterious fourth one that I like to throw in, which is allies. So you have gold, magic items, allies, and levels. And those, in my opinion, are the order at which you should, like, from most to least, be very like liberal with them.
Side, I actually would adjust that slightly. I'd say gold, definitely. Yep. Then I would say charms, like something that's listed in the DMG, yes, but not really talked about, which are like one or limited time abilities that your characters have.
They're very, very underused, and they are great.
Yes. Then I'd say magic items. Then yep, I'd say boons, something that, particularly for warlocks, but really for clerics or paladins also both work for this, is something that they're given for something that your players are given for success of something that their god, their patron, what have you, wanted them to do. And so they get some ability. It might be something to help the players. It might be something to like further their own goals. It really depends. It could be something that, like, you might ask your player, like, what would you want for succeeding in this? And ignoring the, of course, I want 40 wishes. Going with
there's always one. There's always one.
Never wish. Never wish, always, kids.
Always one.
Yeah, I think that's sort of what I think, at least, is. And honestly, we could probably do an entire episode, and very well might, on charms and boons.
Oh dear well. Oh dear well. Oh dear God, yes, well. But that being said, if you folks are enjoying what we're doing here, if you're interested, let us know what you want to hear about next. Otherwise, we're just going to talk about what we want to talk about. And so there.
Yeah.
And sure, I guess that's all we have to talk about today. Do you think we need to do a world building part 3? Or are we ready to move on to the next topic involved? Start delving a little deeper into the basics we've been talking about.
I think we can probably start delving now.
All right, I'm excited. Well, hopefully we'll tweet out some ideas and things about what we're hoping to do next time. And frankly, I hope to see you then.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.